Okay, we have another new filing in United States v. Comey, the false statements case against former FBI Director James Comey. And this one is pretty interesting. This one isn't a motion to dismiss, although it could be grounds for the case being dismissed, could be developed into that. It's a motion seeking disclosure of grand jury transcripts and audio recordings that led to the indictment, or rather, indictments. There's one failed and one passed. Now, before getting into any of the text there, I'm just going to go ahead and give you the too long didn't read version of this. Federal Rule 6E3E2, allows for the disclosure of grand jury materials when a defendant establishes that particularized and factually based grounds exist to support the proposition that irregularities in the grand jury proceeding may create a basis for dismissal of the indictment. In other words, if there's some things that were wonky, unethical, illegal, just messed up about that grand jury that then led to the indictment, then the indictment itself comes from a flawed process. The process of the whole thing, the investigation, the grand jury, the indictment, and then the case, and then the trial, if there is one, all of these things have to be conducted in a ethical and legal way. And there is some pretty good reason to suspect that there were real irregularities with the grand jury process in the United States v. Comey case. Now, a short list of the ones that are cited in this filing are: there's multiple constitutional violations in the indictment itself, and that supports an inference of grand jury irregularities. The indictment misstates the exchange between Cruz and Comey. Okay, now that's a big one. This first one I listed may be up to your opinion whether or not there's constitutional violations in it, but Cruz literally misstating, or whether the indictment misstating the exchange between Cruz and Comey, which it does, it gets the statements incorrect, which I covered in a different video. That's a problem. Next, the indictment misrepresents Cruz's line of questioning of Comey. That's true. It makes it sound as if Cruz is asking Comey, did you ever authorize anyone to serve as an anonymous source in news reports? Right there. That's the quote it uses. In fact, the only quote from Cruz's line of questioning isn't Cruz's question. It's Grassley's from years earlier that Cruz restates in this hearing and poses a question to Comey about something else. Well, that's a huge problem. Next, Cruz misquotes Grassley's question. It's a small error. It's one that you could maybe interpret based on the other lines of questioning that Cruz gave, but it's still a misquote. The circumstances and questionable lawfulness of Halligan's appointment. There's a motion for that that's with a different judge. Same judge is looking at Letitia James's indictment, or is looking at the same motion from the Letitia James case, I should say. Because the appointment of Halligan is questionable. It probably isn't lawful. And at least 2, maybe 3 other U.S. attorneys who were appointed in similar ways, courts have found they were not lawfully appointed already. And that's probably going to happen with Lindsay Halligan. Next, Halligan presented the case to the grand jury alone on her 4th day ever as a prosecutor. She'd never been a prosecutor in any capacity at all, in any way. She'd been an insurance lawyer. And yet she was going to she put a grand jury together and presented all this information to them. And no one else was there with her. No other line prosecutor or anybody else from the office. That presentation that she gave, at first it returned a no true bill for a 3-count indictment, meaning it failed. There was a 3-count indictment. That was the initial version of this. That's hence why there's a person 1, a person 3, but no person 2. The person 2 is from the 3-count indictment. After the 3-count indictment failed, Lindsay Halligan kept the grand jury there past 6:30 p.m. when the court closes at like 5 or 5:30. She kept them there an hour and a half or so past business hours. And then she got a 2-count indictment returned by only 2 votes. Here's the problem with doing that. You may think, yeah, big deal. Courts sometimes run late. That's true. That's very true. But did that happening create the impression on the grand jury that they weren't leaving until they got an indictment? If that's the case, then that's persuasion, coercion of the grand jury to return an indictment so that they could leave and go to dinner and be done with the workday at the courthouse. Maybe that's not the case, but a transcript might show that. Next problem, Halligan signed both the failed and the passed indictment. She signed the 3-count indictment and she signed the 2-count indictment, and then she filed both of them on the docket, which is not what you're supposed to do. And the magistrate judge was really confused, as we know from the transcript of that hearing. Here it is. Grand jury's failure to concur. Right there. The magistrate was like, this has never happened to me before, where an attorney files the no true bill indictment alongside the actual one. I've never seen it before. I've never seen it before in all of my court watching, and neither had that magistrate judge. Next, and this might be the most, these next two might be the worst ones. An agent who served as witness to the grand jury may have been exposed to attorney-client privilege material and then presented that material to the grand jury. We strongly suspect this because that privileged information appears in the indictment. Uh-oh. That is a big, big uh-oh. So I'm going to go over this filing in more detail. But before I do that, I'm going to do it in a different video than this one. But I got to tell you that to wrap up this video, this motion alleges some really serious problems with the indictment and with the case. Problems that could get it tossed. And I think Comey's probably going to get these grand jury transcripts and audio recordings. And what that'll mean is they'll be able to review them to see if there are irregularities that create a basis for dismissal of the indictment. And so that could be yet another motion to dismiss in this case, a 4th one, I believe it would be. When DOJ responds, I'll give them a fair read, but of their motion, just like I do Comey's motions here. But this case is looking pretty shaky. I was trying to think of a way to characterize it that takes it out of the law. It takes it out of court and puts it in a different context, because sometimes that's helpful. And I was thinking about it in terms of like a boxing match. This is an imperfect analogy, okay? But to me, these represent the opponent getting pretty beat up. Right now, DOJ, Lindsay Halligan, they're like this. They're covering up. And Patrick Fitzgerald and Comey's team are landing a bunch of punches on the body, to the head, and Lindsay Halligan, the prosecution, DOJ, they're just like this, taking them. Now, pretty soon they're going to start filing responses, and I think a couple have come in today while I've been recording. These right here. And hey, maybe these are going to be some jabs, some real good jabs that are going to get them off the ropes and are going to start pushing back against Comey. So far, they haven't opened up and really fought against Comey on these motions to dismiss. So I'm looking for that. But right now, this thing looking pretty shaky. And as I've said in other videos, for those of you who think Comey is a no good, very bad guy, of which there are people on both the left and the right who think that, That might be upsetting news to you. But I strongly suspect that you should, if you care about just seeing Comey punished, then we're probably not going to see eye to eye on this. But if you care about justice and you care about fighting public corruption and you care about getting at the truth, then I think you should take heart. And I think you should feel pretty good about this case, because it's not about getting Comey. When the case gets dismissed, people are going to say that DOJ purposefully fumbled the case. They're going to say the fix was in from the beginning. The deep state, crooked judge made sure the case didn't go. Or people are going to say that Comey flipped and there was a deal there and Comey secretly flipped from bad guys to good guys and whatever. In a way, I think some people are going to be right by at least one of those things, but I think they're going to be right for the wrong reasons, and that's okay. I continue to believe that the case against Comey is built to fail, that it's fatally flawed because it's not meant to get Comey. I think it has two other purposes: to be a vehicle for piercing attorney-client privilege on communication between Comey and his attorneys. Those would be the ones that were seized pursuant to 4 search warrants issued during the Arctic Haze investigation. And that's the privileged material that they're talking about here in this motion to disclose grand jury proceedings. It's also the privileged material that the filter team protocol filings are about. That's the material at issue there. Now, I think the second objective of this is to be a legal crowbar to force the unsealing of materials that are currently sealed by another court. My suspicion is that those materials are what's called the 1A package and the Durham memo that were produced from the process of the Tropic Vortex investigation, which was another media leak investigation alongside Arctic Haze. Arctic Haze and Tropic Vortex are one of, or two, of about a half dozen media leak investigations that ran from 2017 to 2021. And then the Schiff leak investigation ran from 2017 to 2023, but I don't know if this will actually ever connect to that. Another objective could be to rehab Comey's image to the public by proving he didn't investigate Trump, he didn't sabotage Trump, he didn't leak to the media, and here's the people who did, which is McCabe. But I kind of doubt that's the case here, because there's already been I.G. Horowitz report on McCabe, I.G. Horowitz report on Comey and the FISAs, Durham's report, and all of those things clear Comey of wrongdoing. And yet people still, on the left and the right, still love to hate Comey. And I think that's just the way it is for now. And sometimes the person who's hated by both sides is actually the good guy.